Hello, welcome to my channel. This is a channel for educational purposes. We generally look at theories of everything or all-encompassing theories that can benefit you if you understand them, study up on them, do your research, and these will give you added perspective in your life. And most likely you've never heard of these because they are generally pretty obscure, but there are things that I've come across in my own research that I wish to share. And today is video number 237 on the reciprocal system of theory. And this theory was first originated by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. And the general idea is that we live in a universe of motion. The universe is not made out of matter, not made out of energy, but it is made out of motion. And for Larson, motion was the relationship between space and time. We can see that in the most basic kind of motion that we know of, speed. Speed is space divided by time. The car is moving 30 miles per hour, 30 miles of space in 1 hour of time, space over time. And you can also see a generalized reciprocal relationship when you look at speed. Say you want to double the speed, and you would say the car is now moving 60 miles per hour, double the space. And but equivalently, you could also say that the car is now moving 30 miles per half hour. You can divide the time. So you can double the space or divide the time. It shows, and they're both the same. It shows a reciprocal relationship between space and time. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that because, well, first of all kinds of motion are relationships between space and time. Not just speed, but everything else that you can think of, such as energy, mass, pressure, magnetic flux, viscosity, fluidity, electric charge, electric current. These are all force, acceleration, resistance. These are all capacitance. These are all relationships between space and time. They're all fractions with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator. But space and time can come in multi-dimensions. This is what Larson is calling coordinate space and coordinate time. We're accustomed to the idea of coordinate space, 3 or more dimensions of space, but there are also 3 or more dimensions of time. And then there is also what Larson calls clock time and clock space. This is a scalar motion or representation of a scalar motion, which is more or less a progression. So the clock is always time is always getting later and later and later. That is the progression of time. And you would envision this using a balloon and a magic marker. You can take put a bunch of dots on the balloon. If you blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other, but in no particular direction. Scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude but no particular direction. And so, but you would envision this, because this is a motion that you can't quite grok in your head, because it's scalar motion is a motion that comes in multiple dimensions, but we only see it as a progression in one dimension. So we would see it as a clock, the hand moving around the clock, a rotation. So we see that motion as a rotate. We see really just the net result of the rotation of the scalar motion as the clock. So Larson calls that clock time. And then there's also clock space. Same kind of visualization, but the idea is that also space is getting farther and farther and farther apart. This is the progression of space. And then space and time also have their discrete units. They come in only discrete units. There is a minimum unit of time below which you have no time. There is a minimum unit of space below which you have no space. You have to have at least one unit to have anything. And those units are small, but they are, there is a significance there. There is no, continuity. They come in chunks. And one chunk of space in one chunk of time, one unit of space in one unit of time, is the speed of light. We can see space over time is speed. One unit of space in one unit of time is the speed of light. So the speed of light is what Larson calls unit speed, or 1/1. And that is, for Larson, the boundary between two separate sectors. One is called the material sector, and one is called the cosmic sector. The material sector is the sector moving slower than the speed of light, and the cosmic sector is the sector that is moving faster than the speed of light, that we're not very accustomed to. As you can see from Einstein's dictum that nothing moves faster than the speed of light, shows that he knows nothing about the cosmic sector. Now, we're having a pretty big storm right here. I'm waiting for the power to go out any moment. But, and those are the rumblings you hear in the back. But within the material and cosmic sectors, there are what you call these more unit boundaries. There's really three boundaries: the unit speed boundary, and then you have the unit space boundary within the material sector. Everything within one unit of space is what Larson calls the time region. And everything in the cosmic sector, everything within one unit of time is what Larson calls the space region. And these small regions within the respective material and cosmic sectors are the areas of atomic and molecular formation. Okay, so that's the basics. Now we're going to look at we're looking at an article that was written by Dr. Bruce Perret. It's the second installment of his anthropology series, and this article is sorry, but I gotta remind myself of the title: New World Religion: Enslaving the Human Spirit with a Blue Beam. Part 2 of his anthropology series, The Hidden Origins of Homo Sapiens. And Dr. Perret wrote these articles under the name Daniel Phoenix 3. So these are what you call the Daniel Papers. And Dr. Perret was a follower of Larson's. I don't believe he ever met Larson in person before Larson died in 1990. Perret himself died back in 2020. And but he is one of the leading kind of revisers of Larson's work and revivers of Larson's work. And so we're going to take over. He's talking about basically in the area of where Zecharia Sitchin is talking about the creation of the human beings to work for the Saurian men or the Dinosaurian men, the Anunnaki. And let's let him get started right here. Now, I was taking him to task here a little bit yesterday briefly because he kind of claimed that the Anunnaki did not attempt to try to do the digging. They needed to come to this planet to dig for gold. The gold was for fixing their own atmosphere. And Sitchin details how they did dig for gold for thousands and thousands of years, which in Peret's estimation is only hundreds of years. But and they couldn't hack it. There was a mutiny among the workers, and that is what forced Enki, the scientist, to decide that he should try to create a slave race. So that's where we're going to start right here. The early attempts were minor genetic alterations of the SM automatons, as the gods wanted to keep the slave mentality fully intact. But these original hybrid slaves turned out to be idiots, and they kept spilling the elixirs and tripping over the ottoman when entering a room, like Dick Van Dyke, apparently. And something had to be done about that. Enki, the Anunnaki science officer, and Ninhursag, the chief medical officer, came up with a plan to make these hybrids more intelligent so that they would be better slaves and able to anticipate the needs of the gods and fulfill them, but not too intelligent. That was reserved for the children of the gods only, along with those tall hats they like to wear to either hide or emulate those extended craniums. And here he shows a bunch of different pictures of extended craniums and top hats that the Pope was wearing, that various Egyptian iconography is wearing, and Abraham Lincoln kind of top hat also. Okay, I'm just kind of trying to look at the footnotes to see if there's... Yeah, so he says the Anunnaki descendants had large skulls extending up and back, over which they wore hats and other decoratives. People of importance emulate this behavior, such as religious leaders wearing hats that extend up in a dome shape behind them. Extended craniums was an outward sign of being a descendant of God. Okay. Cloning was an unsure and time-consuming process, and Enki was in charge of that. So he got the idea to go behind the back of his brother Enlil, general of the Anunnaki military, who was always demanding more and more slaves. I didn't get that from reading Sitchin at all. Not at this early stage, anyway. But anyway, and did some unauthorized updates. Enki introduced genetic modifications to the functional Saurian Neanderthal hybrid slaves in the laboratory cage and the guarded enclosure of Eden by introducing a retrovirus to make their test subjects more mammal-like, giving them this extra intelligence and the hominid ability to reproduce on their own. So, after the completion of the 7 years, which he had completed there, 7 years exactly, and in the second month, on the 17th day, Enki, the Saurian serpent, slithered into the guarded enclosure behind his brother's back, introduced a retrovirus into the food supply, and fed it to the test subjects. As the retrovirus did its work in altering the DNA, the saurian characteristics of the original slaves began to diminish, and they became more ape-like, to the point of shedding their saurian skin and taking on a similar hairy configuration of the Neanderthals. This resulted in the need for clothing, and he made for them coats of skin and clothed them and sent them forth from the Garden of Eden. To protect themselves from the elements, something unnecessary with a natural saurian overcoat. The process took about a month, and on the new moon of the 4th month, Adam and his wife went forth from the Garden of Eden, and they dwelt in the land of Elda, in the land of their creation, to start a Cro-Magnon slave colony under orders of the gods to till the fields, tithe the gods, and procreate more slaves for the other gods. So for some reason, he doesn't mention digging for gold, which is what they were there for in the first place. Okay, things worked well. Plenty of new slaves being created in exponential series, and the gods were happy until a few of these slaves started thinking for themselves and decided to tell the gods to get stuffed and set out on their own, leaving the colonized areas of the gods and heading out to parts unknown where they could not be tracked or controlled. The barbarians that refused to be told what to do and preferred to live their own lives the way they saw fit. I would certainly like to know where Dr. Perret is getting this information, because I haven't encountered this line of thinking of the barbarians setting out on their own and running away and setting up their own colony. Not saying it didn't happen, but he's not documenting any sources there. Okay, this section is called Chains Without Chains. For a moment, let's jump ahead 5,773 years since Cro-Magnon departed the guarded enclosure of Eden to the 21st century and take a look at where these slaves of the gods are now. The ancestral line of the Anunnaki gods, what we call the New World Order, has successfully implemented their plans for keeping their slave society under control. Physical slavery, trapped within artificial political boundaries known as countries, to keep the slaves as manageable groups, not allowing free access across the invisible borders without permission from the masters, and making darn sure they know where everyone is. After all, they don't want a repeat of the barbarian incident where enough free-thinking men got together in one place to challenge the gods. 2. Economic slavery. Trapped within an artificial things of value system known as money, to keep the slaves from acquiring essential items like food and shelter without the consent of their masters. Artificial people known as banks and corporations, also used as a reward system for good slave behavior. Now, perhaps I don't see the footnote here, but no, it's not the right footnote. He is referring here to the apocryphal Book of Jubilees, but that is only for the days and not for this revolt that he was talking about earlier. Okay, C, mental slavery. Trapped within an artificial set of beliefs known as education, where slaves are taught how to serve their masters, how to regurgitate what you are taught, and not question any belief, even if it is totally backwards. And then D, soul slavery. Trapped within an artificial system of faith known as religion, to externalize and restrict the growth of consciousness in an attempt to prevent the human soul from developing into an independent spirit. As you can see, conformity and obedience is rewarded. Difference, antisocial behavior, and independent thought is punished. People are still following the dictates of the gods, except these days we call them lawyers, politicians, and priests, to name but a few. But not much has changed. Obey or you will be punished. It doesn't matter if there was an actual crime or not, as the laws are full of victimless crimes that do nothing but attempt to legislate morality. We are still slaves to the children of the gods, and curiously enough, the same genetic line of Anunnaki descendants. Quote, we should be trained from birth that we should all do what society wants us to do rather than what we want to do for ourselves. That because they have the technology to do it, no one should now be allowed to have their own individual personality. And that there is a quote from Serge Monas, his article, Project Bluebeam from 1994. Okay, I think we're going to stop there and start up with the next section, Not So Original Sin, when we resume tomorrow. So thank you for tuning in and have a great day.